Alrighty, good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you for our internet audience for tuning in. You're in for an awesome and amazing treat. I am very, very excited because I actually ended up writing the proposal to get all these lovely ladies here for us tonight, so I'm very, very excited for this. Just a couple of house rules also for the internet audience. If you're interested in any of the books that the authors are written, we can ship it to you anywhere in the US for free. And if you'd like it personalized, call the number on your screen and everything will be taken care of for you. Also, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The handle's going to be Books and Books. Now, I'm going to be handing off the moderator emceeing duties to Miss Aurora. So let's give a little rally cry for Miss Aurora.
Good evening, everybody. How are you guys tonight? Can you guys hear me? Yes? All good? All right, so we have some amazing authors tonight. I hope you guys are excited. I'm going to introduce them. I'm just going to tell them to come on by and introduce themselves by one. So welcome to the Penguin Tour. Hello. So if you can all sit down and kind of introduce yourselves, that would be amazing. Yeah, come on in. You're all welcome. You're all welcome. And then whoever wants to introduce themselves first can go first.
No, I'm an only child. All about me.
So let's see who wants to start.
There's one mic.
Maybe we can start like over here. Okay. Yeah, perfect.
I came out first. I get to start. That's how that works. Hi, I am Rachel Hawkins. I am the author of the Rebel Belle series, which is a story of a Southern Belle type who gets superpowers and has to defend a boy who can see the future. So that old story. So yeah, that is me, and I'm gonna pass it on down. Relinquishing Mike.
Hi, I'm Olwen Hamilton, and I wrote Rebel of the Sands, which is a Wild West meets Arabian Nights story about a girl who's a sharpshooter who winds up on the run across the desert with a boy with some secrets fleeing the Sultan's army.
Hi, I'm Alison Goodman. I'm the author of The Dark Days Club, which I call Jane Austen Goes Demon Hunting, with a dash of dashing romance, of course, as well.
Hi, I'm Seba Tahir. I wrote An Ember in the Ashes. Hello. And it's about, I haven't actually done this in a while because I've been in the writing cave for so long that I sort of forgot what my first book was about. But I think it's about a girl who is fighting for her family and a soldier who's fighting for his freedom. I think that's it.
I think that's me. I'm stealing the attention again. Because I can't stand it.
I'll wait.
Sorry. Oh, here we go. Sorry,
I should shut my mouth too. I'm April Genevieve DeHulke. I wrote Wink, Poppy, Midnight, which is about, well, there's three main characters, two girls and a boy, and one's a hero, one's a villain, and one's a liar.
Yay! Awesome. So I'm going to ask you guys a few questions. We can just have a casual conversation. You guys can pass the mic. And then once we're done with some of these questions, I want the audience to ask some questions. Is that okay? Okay, great. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about your book and your characters? Who wants to start?
You got it. Go for it.
So my book is, it's a young adult fantasy, and it's about two people. It's about a girl named Laya, and her brother is taken from her by soldiers in this empire where she lives. And it's also about a soldier named Elias, who is a soldier of the empire, and he doesn't want to be a soldier anymore. Laya was very similar to me as a 17-year-old. I was not very brave, and she's very much inspired by that. And Elias is sort of who I would want to be if I could, have sort of an alternate timeline where I could, be a badass warrior. So, yeah.
Thanks. My main character is Lady Helen Rexhall, and she's making her debut to Queen Charlotte. So it's set in 1812 in London, and it's historically accurate. So all the events in it, apart from the kind of supernaturally ones, are all accurate. And she is noticing some newfound attributes that are happening to her, and she meets Lord Carlston. Dun, dun, dun. Who is also knows about these attributes, and the story goes from there.
My main character is named Amani, and she is a 16-year-old sharpshooter from a sort of dead-end desert town, and she decides that she wants to get out of there, and in order to do that, she figures that her best way out is to enter an underground shooting contest disguised as a boy, because that always goes so well. And it doesn't go totally according to plan. Instead of winning the money pot, she winds up getting her fate tangled with another competitor who's there and getting herself in some trouble that starts the story off.
My main character is Harper Price, who is very much not me. She's very type A. She is very much queen bee of her school. She's a valedictorian, or going to be valedictorian. She's head cheerleader. She's SGA president. She is all the things. I like to describe her that she sort of came to me as like, what if Blair Waldorf from Gossip Girl had superpowers other than the ones that she already clearly had. And so she has a very perfect life. And of course, if you have a protagonist with a perfect life, the first thing that you need to do to make an interesting book is to ruin her life for her. And she ends up sort of involved in this whole thing of being a knight who must defend, like I said, a boy who can see the future, an oracle, whose name is David Stark. And David is probably a lot closer actually to me than Harper ever was. David is very snarky and has terrible eyesight. So I feel like we have that. And we both work on that. Well, he works on the newspaper. I did the yearbook. And so yeah, that's, and having that kind of, when you have to protect someone who you would sort of happily kill, it's, it gets kind of complicated. So.
Well, I can't talk about my book. I'll give anything I say is spoilerish. I can't talk about it.
All right, so speaking of these characters, what's the most fun aspect of writing for a young adult audience? Like, what do you think is the most fun part about this type of audience that loves your books?
The enthusiasm, the unabashed love. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I would echo that and say that just being able to connect with fans and have it be meaningful, being able to talk on Twitter to your fans or answer their questions or see their fan art. There's a love from the YA community that's far more inspiring than I think what those poor adult book authors get.
Absolutely, and also from writing aspect, writing for an age group that is between 14 to 18, maybe even going up to 25. There's a newness to every kind of adult experience, and I love that kind of first time experience for the writing. It's just wonderful to be able to do. So
I'd echo all that, and also I like the coming of age aspect, because I don't think you ever stop coming of age when you're 16 or 18 or 27, and it just keeps happening. You don't hit 18 and be like, and everything is figured out, and this is the human I will be for the rest of my life. And I like getting to do that the first time, and then because everyone who's reading, no matter what age they are, might be coming of age.
Definitely echoing what these other lovely ladies have said. I think the passion in the YA community is so nice. And actually, people, they never sort of, I was an English major, so everybody sort of hides behind how they feel about a book. Like, well, I didn't feel like the author successfully, but in YA, it's like, I love this book. I hate this book, and and I actually really respect that. It's a very pure reaction. And I also I feel like the books that we read when we're young, or we're just young at heart, whichever, are the ones that really kind of, they sort of get in there, and that's a neat thing to me, the idea that the books that were part of my writer DNA, the writer that I became, they all got in there before I was probably 17 even, when I was very young. And I think that's really cool that you have a chance to sort of get your books in there, maybe the cooking process of a young writer or young reader. That's a neat thing to me.
And speaking about character development and writing for this type of audience, who has been the easiest and hardest character to write when it comes to your novels?
Wave it in the middle.
I guess I'll take that bullet. I think Amani was maybe the easiest to write because she sort of drove the story, because the first line in the book is something along the lines of, she wasn't up to no good, but she wasn't up to no bad either. And it is that she sort of literally does the first thing that comes into her mind every time. So whenever I was stuck, that was actually pretty easy. So I'd be like, what's the first thing that comes to my head? And regardless of whether it was a really terrible idea or like a completely sensible idea, that made it quite easy to write. Come back to me for the hardest. I'll have to think about it.
Well, I think always the main character is both the easiest and the hardest, because you're living that character. Lady Helena was living that character, but also getting her balance is always a very difficult thing when you're going to get that balance for that character. I did find writing the men sometimes challenging. Lord Carlston's got a lot of kind of secrets, and keeping those straight in my head, and also how he's reacting to his world was quite difficult sometimes, but always very thrilling with him. And also because he's got a counterpart in the sense of there's two men. So I was balancing the two men, and that was kind of a challenge as well. So the Duke of Selborne is a flip side of Carlston. So just doing that kind of balance thing was very, very both difficult, but also one of the joys of writing the book.
I liked writing Poppy. Her chapters were short. It was all voice. It was emotionally purging for me to write her. I didn't like writing Midnight as much. He's the main character. That's always harder. His chapters were longer. I didn't mind that he was a male. That didn't bother me. That was fine. But short chapters. That was great.
So I didn't have a very difficult time writing I have two main characters in my book. One is Laia and one is Elias. And Laia was pretty easy to write. Elias was more a pain in the neck. And I think it's just because he's a soldier, and I'm not a soldier, shockingly. And so I ended up actually interviewing soldiers and a West Point cadet and a police officer and an FBI agent, and a bunch of different sort of soldiery types to get a sense of who they are and what it means to have like the soul of a warrior. And that was really helpful. And then right now with my second book, I have one character who's so annoying to write. She's driving me crazy. And she's not Laia, and she's not Elias. Her name is Helene, and she is very, very complicated. And there are times where like I would get to her chapters and I'd be like, no. But we got there. I just had a rough time because I think that I relate to her a lot. And I think anytime you really see yourself in the character, but it's not just sort of the shallow stuff, it's the deeper emotional stuff, you're like, I don't want to touch that. So
Harper was definitely hard to write for me because she is so very far from me personally. Harper is very, whereas I'm very, and you can quote me on that. So that made it difficult. It was hard for me to understand like that, how much she cares about things and how responsible she feels for things. Getting into her headspace, and they're like, why though? Like, why is she like this? I mean, some people are just like that, and it's fine. But that was kind of difficult for me. David was always fairly easy to write for me because, like I said, he felt a little bit closer to me. And then there's a character that you see briefly in Rebel Belle who comes back in the last book, Lady Renegade's Blythe, who was probably like the most fun to write though, because Blythe is kind of like pure id. So she also has superpowers, but she just goes with them, and like I think actually finds like a lot of joy in having them, which Harper feels she's very Spider-Man about the whole thing. It's the whole like great power, great responsibility. Whereas Blythe is like, whatever, we're hot girls who could do magic, let's do this. And so that was a lot of fun to write for sure.
And when it comes to writing, what is the most interesting thing you've done in the sake of research as authors? Interesting, exciting.
All right,
sort of thing.
I'll take that. Well, I'll go for that. In Rebel Belle, someone is murdered with a shoe in, I believe, chapter 2 or 3, and I really did have to check. Like, could you do that? Could you like really like smack like a stiletto? Like, where exactly in this general area And it's always funny to like explain to people too, like the book is so funny. Someone gets stabbed in the throat with a stiletto, but after that, it's very funny. So like that, like there was like a little bit of medical research, and also like all the stuff about debutantes, because there's a big thing at the end of book 1 where she's going to a debutante ball, and I had never done. It's shocking, I know. I had never done the debutante ball thing, and I went to the school that Harper goes to in the Rebel Belle books is absolutely based on the high school that I went to. I went to a very small private school in South Alabama, and I knew tons of girls who were debutantes in my graduating class, and I Facebook messaged all of them, like out of nowhere, like, hi, we haven't spoken since 1998, but you know how you were a debutante? And every single one of them messaged me back with something interesting, and I thought that was also, because these were not necessarily girls that I was all that close to, so that was also kind of a fun thing. Like, not only did I learn something, but I was kind of like, oh, look at us. Like, now, like, girls I didn't really talk to in high school or really care about. But, like, now we're all, like, ladies in our 30s becoming friends. So that was, like, I think that was, like, my favorite thing. Like, I felt like I made new old friends from asking them weird stuff about debutantes. So...
I did a lot of my research for book 1 from sort of reading like folktales and things like that, but I did for book 2 read an entire book about harems, and it was one of those times when I hadn't spoken to another human for a few days, and so I was starting to go like a little bit crazy, and so I found myself texting friends being like, harems are amazing. They're exactly like high school, but with more infanticide. And at that point, they were like, you've clearly cracked, which was great. And I'm sure I'm on some sort of FBI watch list from writing the first one, because there'll be like a Google search of like how to poison someone, but without completely killing them, followed by me like trying to Google Maps my way from the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula to the top to figure out how long that will take, which they don't super like you to do. I got like shut down a few times by Google Maps, and I was like, why is this happening? Why won't it give me these directions? It turns out because I kept dropping at the top northern pin in Israel, and they don't love you to try to do that on Google Maps. So I'm sure that research, I'm being watched as we speak.
I had an entire Regency wardrobe made with Spencers and Polices and ball gowns and all of that, because I had to do research. And I needed to know how far you could swing a sword in a kind of police, was my rationalization. I also learned how to do Regency dancing. So I went to classes, and now I teach it because I just love it so much. So
can we all learn that on tour?
Yes, we can. I even have the music.
I just actually want to say that really shows, because I'm pretty obsessed with Allison's book. Like when I met her today, I fangirled, and she was like, no, not really. She was very nice. But it really does show. It's just so well done. The dresses especially. Like I was looking them up, and I was trying to figure out like what the presentation to the Queen, like what types of dresses they wore, and I found like all these pictures. So yeah, good job. I think the most interesting piece of research I did was when I interviewed this West Point cadet, and it was because he was just very distinctive and sort of what I imagined, but also not what I imagined. So, West Point's a military academy, and this kid was about 20 years old, and I remember walking into the coffee shop where I was supposed to meet him, and it was really packed. It was early in the morning, and like I knew it was him instantly, not because he was, in uniform or anything, because he was like, he had the best posture of like every single person in there. And he turns around and he's like, "Hello, I'm Connor," and he was, just one of the most impressive 20-year-olds I've ever met. Totally knew what he wanted in life, was absolutely committed to the military and to the United States. And it was just such a fascinating conversation. He answered all of my questions, even like the really personal ones, so politely and like with such grace, and actually answered some difficult stuff too. And then he told me all these like wild things they do at West Point, like different, like, punishments, like if you do something wrong, like you have to like walk in like corners or angles or something. I forget how he said it, but you basically have to walk in a certain way and like turn a corner like sharply. It's just crazy. Anyway, I thought that was really cool.
All the research I did was for Wink. her mother was a fortune teller, and so I studied tarot a lot, and that was really interesting. And I read fairy tales. I read a lot of annotated fairy tales, none of which I used. I made up my own for the book.
Tell us the bedtime story.
I can tell you the bedtime stories.
I'm so excited.
I researched missing persons, because Wink is a little bit obsessed with people who just disappear one day and no one knows where they go. And that was a rabbit hole. Fascinating stories of like heiresses in the 1920s who just one day gone. What happened to them? You know, were they killed? They just had enough of their life and they just moved to Paris. And I know.
I mean, if you want to lose a day of your lives, Wikipedia article on unexplained disappearances.
Gone. Yeah, the whole day.
And after the research, what's your ideal environment for writing?
Ideal?
Or the one you can deal with, yeah.
Writing. I try to mix it up a bit. I mean, I set up an office for myself when I bought a house, and then I just kept writing on my purple couch. Sometimes I try to write outside. Do you have a good answer for this?
I have like a lair now, and this is sort of a hard one. So I live in California, where the houses are the size of like this table. It's probably a good sized house in California, and so it didn't really have much space. So I was actually migrating from coffee shop to coffee shop, which was great because at my launch I went to all of them and I was like, guess what? You know that book I was writing? I finished it. You should come to my launch party. And then actually a lot of random baristas ended up showing up to my launch party. But so I used to migrate a lot. But then with this last book, I started really struggling with distractions. So then I got an office, just like a separate office, and I realized what I need, which is darkness. So I have like one lamp, and I won't turn on the overhead lights, and I have a lot of art and stuff on the walls, and I have a big comfy red leather chair, and like all my favorite books, and really, really good headphones, which is sort of essential for me. Yeah, the noise canceling. And I share an office with this dude, and he's really lovely and nice, but like he'll knock on the door and be like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, huh? And he's like, never mind.
Well, I live in Australia. I live in Melbourne, and I have a room of my own, according to Virginia Woolf, which is essential for every writer. It's also like you. I've got all my research around me. I've got 1812 newspapers stacked up, and I've got all my books about the Regency, and I've got maps on the wall, and I've got my little dog, sort of sitting by my feet. He's very old. And so I sit there and I do quite long hours, so it's nice and comfortable and good luck. I need light. I need light, yeah. And
I started writing in the dark, and I went insane.
Writing in the dark. My husband's like, what is wrong with you? He'll come, like, I'll be writing and he'll come out into the living room and he'll flip on all the lights and I'm like, what are you doing? It's not good.
I have to write in coffee shops, which I know sounds like an artsy like writer-y thing to wander off and do, but it's because I've always lived with other people. I live in London, so I've shared flats with loads of different people, and they're always there, or their boyfriends are there, or like whatever. There's people in the house, and I've never had a desk. My last place actually dismantled the desk to put a bookshelf there, so that one's on me. But yeah, I sort of got in the habit of going to sit in coffee shops to write there for ages, because also at my house people don't bring me lattes throughout the day. That's the other problem with it. But my ideal one is one that's actually on a top. It's one that has a really terrible internet connection, so I don't get distracted. It has a top floor so that I can't see the pastry, so that, again, I don't get distracted. And it's a chain so that I don't feel bad about ordering one coffee and sitting there for 8 hours without moving and refilling, which I do feel bad about if I do an Independence, because I just will sit there for 8 hours and they won't bother me and they don't care. And I also will always, my version of darkness is putting a single song on repeat for 8 hours until it blends into white noise. And then I'm like, why can't I get LaRue Bulletproof out of my head? Oh, it's because I listened to it for 8 hours straight. But yeah, that's pretty much where I write.
I think like my ideal writing environment, which I haven't had since I was in first grade, But when I was in first grade, if you were good, you got to go sit in a desk in a refrigerator box. And I really think like I should probably try that because like that was the coolest thing to me. Like a refrigerator box, like a cardboard box, like a box. No, not like in a refrigerator. So I was like, holy crap. Yeah. No, like, yeah. And there was like a desk in there with a lamp. And that was like a reward. No, it was like a reward. Like, do you want to go do your work in the refrigerator box? And I was like, yes, I do want to work in the refrigerator box. So I don't really remember. This was like 1986, Alwyn. I'm super old. So yeah, it was a long time ago. So I don't remember. If Mrs. Sanders is watching this, let me know if we could decorate. I really could. I could totally make one. I could totally do that. I've got like a closet I'm not using. I could probably. It's all like very sad, like tragic orphany. That like that's what I was into. It's like Matilda, yeah. Or Harry Potter, like these are the things that, but I also really, really love, and this is another thing, so it's like, it's an opposite thing, it's like the refrigerator box, or I really like to work at like big dining room tables by myself. A few years ago, my family was on vacation in Scotland, and we had this, I was on like an extremely tight deadline, because that's the fun thing about being a writer, is that like, hey, deadlines happen when you're supposed to be doing things with your family. And I didn't want to like ruin their vacation for them, even though my books were paying for it, so you know. Mama's got to write, you guys. You want to keep doing this kind of stuff. But anyway, so I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go down to the dining room and write until they got up around 9. So I was like, that way I just didn't want my kid to one day be like, and then we couldn't go to Loch Ness because my mom was writing. So it's like really tragic. And I loved that. There was like something really magical about, now I am totally a morning person though. I naturally get up at like 6:30 and stuff. So for me, being up at 5, like, I don't know, it just felt like there was something kind of magical in that. And like I liked people in the house, but people who couldn't bother me because they were sleeping, but they were there. So I couldn't just do the random things that I would do if I were in the house by myself. I couldn't like turn on the TV or whatever. So I think that's like my idea, like a big table or a refrigerator box. It's, you know, I like to have some balance. It's yin and yang. So.
And another question related to writing. If you could work with any author, who would it be? Oh, Tuffy.
Renee Attier, in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Heartbeat.
Yeah.
Joss Whedon.
Yes.
Have a good answer.
Gosh, I don't even know. One of these days I want to write a book with Kirsten White, because Kirsten and I have a very similar vibe of like fun, although her latest book is like really cool and has like impalings and cool things like that, and it's not funny at all, but it's excellent. So yeah, I've always kind of wanted to do a book with Kirsten or Steph Perkins. I think like Stephanie Perkins and I both really like people kissing in foreign cities, so I think that would be really fun.
Still don't have an answer.
This is tough. Susanna Clark, I mean, I love her. She intimidates me. I think I'd be too scared to talk to her, honestly. She's so incredible. Maggie Stiefvater, Lee Bardugo, that'd be awesome.
Also, Nicola Yoon. I would like to write a book with Nikki. We would probably just end up talking the entire time, and we wouldn't write anything. I'm sorry. I hijacked.
Sorry.
Anybody?
Still don't have a good answer, but I guess I could be Robert Galbraith for J.K. Rowling or something like that. I'd do that for free.
And this is a one-word answer. What's the first word you think about when you read a book with a cliffhanger?
This is on the internet. They said we couldn't say that. Very PG.
Use your
Let's
word
keep it
bleep
PG.
then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Cliffhanger at the end, the very end,
The very end.
the very end.
The very end.
I expect this is more than one word answer, but I expect cliffhangers in second books.
There you
just
go,
not
and
in
you can
first
go with that,
ones.
yes.
That's I expect.
You expect the
people to
cliffhangers.
wind up frozen in carbonite at the end of the second book, just not the end of the first one. Expected.
Expect it, exactly, and go with it, and go with the flow.
Expected.
Yeah, I kind of went past the first thought, and it's right into the whole essay now. So I'm going to wind back to, yeah. Yeah, that's
Awesome.
yeah.
So you know what? We can expect cliffhangers. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
I think I used to be like, no, with lots of O's. And now it's more like, ha.
Betrayal. I feel betrayed. But I kind of love them too. I mean, once I get past that feeling, then it's love, I think.
Awesome. And what are you guys reading right now, and what do you have next on your TBR? Like, to be read next. What is something you're reading now, and what you have next that you want to read?
I'm reading a book right now called The Orphan Master's Son, which is like pretty dark. It's about like North Korea. And next on my list is your book. Really? Yes.
I'm reading An Ember in the Ashes at the moment and enjoying it so much. And my to be read is actually 1812 newspapers.
I finished Wing Poppy Midnight on the plane, and I feel much less awesome about my cousin naming his new baby Poppy after it. But we're just not going to talk about that. I'm just like, yeah, I might just call her by her full name, which is Penelope. Next up, I've been struggling to start something at the moment. Whatever's on my reader that's with me.
I'm actually reading a lot of nonfiction right now. Nonfiction is a very good sort of brain cleanse for me when I'm actually writing fiction. So I'm reading 2 books right now. I'm reading a book called Midnight at Para Palace, which is about sort of the birth of modern Istanbul, which doesn't sound interesting, but it's fascinating and so good. And so very far from anything that I write that's really enjoyable. And I just started on the plane a book called Jane Steele that just came out today by Lindsay Fay. It is Jane Eyre if she were a serial killer. Which, if that doesn't make you want to read that book, I don't know what to say to you. And so, yeah, my TBR probably it's a lot of nonfiction. I like a lot of like royal biographies. I like stuff about like giant 600-page books about people who were dead in 1161. I don't know what my problem is.
And I'm going to ask a question, and then I want the audience to ask questions. So how do you feel when you see your book on bookshelves? Come on, let's be real. Let's be real. How do you feel when you walk into a bookstore and there's your book just looking at you? What's the first thing you think about?
The first time I saw it, my agent almost had to come get me because it was on bookshelves in the UK a little bit earlier than it was out because someone had emailed me, a friend was being like, Waterstones say your book is shipped, and I was going out to meet someone for dinner, and I was like passing one, so I was like, I'll go in and see if it's there, and it was, and I stood there for probably a good 35 minutes, like 30, 40 minutes. Like, it took me a while to like work, I like tweeted it, and then it took me a while to work up to touch them, and then it took me like a little bit longer to work up to ask if I could sign them, and because I tweeted it, my agent was like, are you still in the bookstore? Like, she lives down the road from where I was, and she was like, do you need me to come get you? I was like, no, it's okay, there's someone waiting for me with drinks and dinner, I will make it to that. But yeah, it was a little bit overwhelming.
I remember when Eon came out, we were in one of the department stores in Melbourne, and there was a huge stack of them. And I'd never seen a huge stack of my books before. And my mum was with me, and I said, look, Mum, over there. So we kind of sidled up to it, and my mum was circling it, proud mum. and the sales assistant came over, and she said, would you like some help? And Mum said, my daughter wrote this. And she went, oh, that's nice. Clearly thinking mental. Because when we walked away, because we went up the escalator, we looked back and she was looking at the photo and holding it up and seeing if I looked like it.
Just happiness, joy. I think a lot of times I don't actually notice. I have 2 little boys. They're 6 and 4. They notice my book a lot more than I do. So if we're in Target or something, they'll be like, "And I'm in the Ashes," and it's actually very sweet because they get excited like every single time. Like, they're never not thrilled about it, and so that I think makes me appreciate it more.
It kind of creeps me out. It does. I just kind of run when I see my book. I haven't really adjusted to this idea that I'm an author. Authors for me are these beautiful divine beings that I'm not. And no, I'm still struggling with it, actually.
Yeah, it's still just really, really cool. Like when my friend and I came in tonight, Lady Renegades is, out front, and that's my 7th book. Like I've done this for a while now, and I was still like, oh my God, there it is. A bunch of and I love that though, because like so much of writing, like I think that we talk a lot about like how hard it is, and it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Because I really do. I feel like every book I write, I'm like, did I just forget how to write a book? Do I not know how to do this anymore? Maybe this is the one where it just all went away. And so getting to see it is really cool. And I still have a picture of when I saw, my first book was a book called Hex Hall. And when I first saw it on shelves, I was with my little boy who's now 10, but who was 4 then. And I was like, here, take a picture of mommy by her book. And he's 4, and I handed it, here, do it. And all he got was me from about here down and my book. But like the smile is so bright that I was like, he actually got the best possible representation that he could have gotten of how I felt seeing my very first book on the shelf. So it's a special picture to me now.
Wonderful. So I would like to open the floor for fan questions. So who wants to go first?
For Miss Hawkins, kind of a two-parter.
Okay.
1, are you ever planning to go back to Hex Hall? I don't know, give Izzy another shot at Archer. And number 2, what happened to Izzy's sister? You never actually explained that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a story. No, the Hex Hall books were a huge amount of fun. I had so much fun writing them. I still feel very strongly about School Spirits. I love it. Business things happened. I changed publishers sort of in the middle of all of that. And so there had always been a plan to be more. But when I switched, it was just not really feasible anymore. And the editor who had worked on my Izzy books was now at a totally different house from the one I'd started at. So it just didn't quite come together. I don't really know what happened to Finley, Izzy's sister, because like I had planned on like figuring that out later. I am sure that Torin, the Wizard in the Mirror, if you've read those books, had something to do with it. Because that's the kind of guy Torin was. I do think one day I will go back to those, maybe even like in small things that I do as like ebook only type deals. I haven't had time. But I have about half of a sequel written on my computer, just like waiting there. They were going to hunt monsters at summer camp, which I still feel really strongly about hunting monsters at summer camp. So maybe one day, but I can't promise anything. I hope. So.
Anybody want to go next? Oh. Yeah. Whoever wants to go first? Who wants to go first? You go first.
My question is for Sabah. My favorite character in Ember in the Ashes is the Commandant. It makes me wonder, when you write Laya, she's kind of scared, kind of not. She doesn't have a lot of courage at first, and Elias is completely different, so valiant and knows what he wants. But then the Commandant is rotten and mean and awful. Like, how do you go from writing these two characters that are in essence good to all of a sudden write this person that's just horrible?
For me, I was in journalism for a really long time, and so I read about people who were like her, and who are real and who are in our world, and a lot of them are like dictators of small nations, and they do horrible things, and they're surrounded by people who, their victims are people who are good and who are trying to survive and get through, and sometimes the people who support them thought they were good, and then all of a sudden they're supporting someone who's actually really horrible. And so I sort of, in a weird way, when I write someone like the Commandant, I try to think about these people who live in our world and what they must be thinking and why they might do the things that they do that are so horrible. And it almost helps me understand our world a little bit better and helps me make sense of it. So that's sort of it. But I would say that in terms of separating them out and being able to write, Laya how she truly is versus Elias how he truly is, I actually, at the very end of a draft, I'll go through and I'll separate out the chapters, and I'll do all Laya chapters and listen to music that makes me think of her, and images that make me think of her, and then I'll do the same for Elias, and that helps me keep them distinct and keep their voices distinct. I hope that answered your question.
With that, I guess does Helene get her own chapters in the second book?
She does.
Nice.
What has been the toughest criticism
know. I don't read any reviews. The only criticism I would get would be from my editor. Criticism. I mean, do you guys want to answer this?
I mean, there's a lot of that comes at you from outside sources, but from my editor, the hardest one that I found was, you worry too much, which I find very hard because I worry. I like to worry. I really worry a lot. That was hard.
Yeah, I think it's always hard for me. Like, I think that sometimes, like, I write funny books, and even though people get murdered and there's high body counts, but still they're very funny. And so sometimes those can, like, people sort of dismiss as like, well, that's fluff. And I'm always kind of like, I think that there's room for fluff in this world, quite frankly, and I think that that's fine, you know, that things can be funny and actiony and that kind of thing. Those are the things that, because I also really like actiony, funny books too. So I'm always like, hey, like, there's, you know, there's a book for everybody. We've all sort of got our role to play.
Is fluff meant to be criticism?
Yeah, I'm like, that sounds great.
Yes.
I was like, I have an entire section on my Kindle titled Trash, and those are like my favorite books. Like, that's a high compliment for me if I call something trash.
I'm like you, April. I don't really put myself through too much pain by reading reviews and that kind of stuff. I think in terms of editing, I can sometimes go a little bit overboard with the violence. Whoa, pull it back! So yeah, pull it back a bit. So yeah, gotta go and just pull it back. And I've another editor, because I get edited by both the US editor and an Australian editor at the same time, and then I meld the two edits together, which is fun. So they do have a bit of a different kind of outlook on it. And my Australian editor says, go for it. We can always pull it back later. And so I go for it. And then I've got to go and pull it back. So, but yeah, it's always a balancing act of how much is right for the tone of the book.
So I don't know. I feel like criticism is one of those things where you just have to sort of accept it. It's not like it's difficult or not difficult. And I'm not saying that, you know, if I read, you know, if I read something like, so when you're an author, a lot of times people tweet you bad reviews. It's very strange. But like I've actually had someone email me like a really mean review, and like there was no like name. I think they used like a fake address, and they just like sent me the email, and it was like review ! So I opened it because I was like, oh, maybe it's good. No, it wasn't good. But I think it's always hard for me when people will talk about like how, well, this other book did this thing better, and it's sort of like, well, you know, that's that book and my book is this book, and so they're kind of separate. And actually that bothers me for books that I like too. So especially when I'm reading like literary reviews of like adult literary novels, and the reviewer will say like, you know, well, this author did X better, and it's kind of like, well,
I mean, I try to, even my favorite books, there's some parts that I'm like, oh, this part again. Like when I'm rereading, that I just don't like as much as the rest. I mean, but I love the book as a whole. And that's how I feel about books. I mean, they shouldn't be perfect. They should be beautifully flawed.
Yes.
The other thing about criticism is I found that it was like, you'll notice a lot of it as you get it. It's like there are just so many different opinions. Like you'll read one right after the other. It's like the middle was really boring, and then the next review will be like the middle was so exciting. And so that sort of like teaches you it's all subjective as well.
Over here.
How do you guys select it? Are you in any way, shape, or form involved in the selection of your covers? I'm always very curious about how is it that after you've gone through all this heartache and pain to write this book, how do you make it, you know, how do you choose a face for it, if you even choose one?
And that's going to be interesting to hear. I have zero power. I think that I have power of veto, but that may be illusory. I'm not sure. They may just be telling me like, no, you can say no. And then like, if I try, they would be like, everyone here really loves it though. So the really cool, I really love covers though, because I always feel like that's somebody else's job, you know, they're at the publisher. And it's so interesting to me. Like I have a middle grade novel coming out in October called Journey's End. And I had such a hard time writing that book, like, because I'd never written a middle grade before, and I was like, it's like writing with oven mitts. I think I said that like 1,000 times. Yeah, where's the kiss? No one can be murdered in this book because it's weird. And so it was so hard to write, and I felt like I'd fought with that book. And then when I got the cover for it, which again, I had no say in, they just sent me here's the comp, whatever, and I saw it, and it was like the cover artist had read that book and went, no, you don't hate this book. You love this book. Look, here's everything you love in it right here on this cover. This is what I saw in it. And I suddenly was like, oh my God, you're right. I do love this book. Thank you so much. And it was the same lady that had done my Rebel Belle covers, and they look completely different. So I think that can be really, I actually really love surrendering that power to somebody else who, like, that's their job. That's not mine. I don't have to worry about it. And so to me, that's very freeing. Like, what can you do, extremely talented person, that I can't do? So yeah, I've always been very lucky. I have loved every book cover I've ever had. They've all been very different, but I've been really happy with them. So.
Yeah, my favorite thing about my cover is that when people tweet, like, such a beautiful cover, I could be like, I know, right? Because I had nothing to do with it. I can sort of, in a way, boast about it because it's not boastful, because I did nothing. Someone named Will did everything. And I'll be like, I know, right? And then at Will Steele to embarrass him. And whereas, if someone's like, I like the book, I'm like, oh, thank you so much. Whereas the cover, I didn't have any. I'm sure if I'd hated it, I would have said something, but I didn't. And I think I actively avoided imagining any kind of face for the book while it was in the process of getting the cover, because if I'd gotten stuck in a certain image, I would have been like, oh, this is a beautiful cover, but it's not what I imagined, and it's not what she looks like, or whatever, it would have been. So I'm glad that I left it in someone else's hands.
The Dark Days Club is my 5th book, so I've had 5 covers, and I've been really lucky with all my covers. And I don't know if it's like you, but when you get the JPEG of the cover and it loads really slowly, and you're going, what's going to happen? The first cover that came through for the Dark Days Club was not the right cover. And so when I looked at it, I thought, there's aspects of this that I really like, but it's not the book. And I went back and I have got a very good agent. And I said, no, I can't have this cover. And we went back and we discussed it, and no, we didn't have that cover. So there is the power of veto. And the Dark Days Club was a very, I think, quite a difficult book to put a good cover on. And it's got a beautiful cover and beautiful font that Kristen Smith and her associate did the beautiful cover for it. And I have the utmost respect for the people who the marketing people and the artists that trying to go and get that absolute corker of a cover that's you just want to touch and hold and stroke. And so the embossing on the Dark Days Club, which if you put it to the light, that was on the original idea, that with all the little demons worked into it. But that's so the demons that are on the end papers are in that embossing. So that was part of the first cover, but that's the only thing that survived from it.
So my experience was different, maybe because I'm a big jerk, I don't know. But I was pretty involved with my covers, and I probably annoyed the hell out of the person who I was speaking with, because I was like, well, the architecture is not right because it's not ancient Rome, and so I pointed out a lot of things that I liked and things that I didn't like, and color stuff, and I did the same thing with my second cover, where just sort of trying to figure out the right balance between all the different elements and pull them together. I also, my agent and I would really go to town on discussing the covers, things we loved and then things that we thought could be changed. But there was never a point where I saw my cover, even the very, very first iteration, and was like, what is that? They always had it right from the very beginning. They had the feeling right. They had, the emotion of it, and the focus was always right. It was more like all these sort of tweaks that I contributed to. But I didn't actually do anything. I mostly just sent long emails.
I really, really liked my Wink Poppy Midnight cover a lot. I think they really grasped the fairy tale aspects out of my book. I just loved it. I don't really have anything to say.
When the Dark Days Club real cover came through, they had accidentally made the woman on the front in Victorian gear rather than Regency gear. And as I saw it come down, I thought, 1850s, they've got it wrong. That's how much of a geek I am now about the fashion. But also, when they changed it, because I said to you, can make it the right era, she looked pregnant. And I was like, so I've got this drawing at home, which is just hilarious. I've got this great big arrow saying, less pregnant, please.
Anybody else have a question? Yes, over there.
When you're writing your characters, do you have a person that yes, this is how my character looks, or you just take different aspects from different people and assign that to the character?
Like the absolute best part about writing like dudes is the research, because I'm like, what hot man should I make my character look like? But no, I had some images, but for the most part I tried to keep it pretty open because I wanted, I had the basics. My characters are both darker skinned, and that was important to me. But other than that, there was nothing. And like eye color, that sort of thing, I think I saw in my head, but there was no like one specific image. And actually, I think what's so interesting is when you start seeing things like fan art or edits or fan casts, and you kind of start to see how other people see your characters. I think that's just the coolest thing.
Lady Helen has some physical attributes that are part of her what she is in the world. So that was set for me, those physical attributes. And she's taller than I am, so I have to occasionally get tall people to reach for things to see if they can reach for them. So I've asked people to say, could you just see how far you can reach up so I can see what that is like? And with the men, I did have some kind of actors in mind when I was writing them, but they always drift away from that. They always sort of go away from that kind of template, because then their character infuses what they're doing, and so that changes. Who was Lord Carlston? Yes. Who did he start off with? Oh, what was his name? The guy who plays the new Superman.
Oh,
that's where we started. Henry Cavill, yeah.
I didn't particularly enjoy that movie, but in the first 10 minutes his shirt had burned off and I was like, yeah, I'm watching this. It's... I have a Pinterest board of sort of various people's faces and things like that, and I'd love to say that was actual research and not procrastination, but I would be lying to you. I don't know if you found this as well, but it's actually quite hard to find a large number of pictures of non-white people, actors and things like that, to sort of fan cast your own books. So I do sometimes get to tweet GIFs of shirtless men mainly, at people on Twitter, but apart from that I don't have anything firm in mind.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the day when I can turn in a Pinterest board as like a book proposal. Like, it's this. Yeah, it will feel. This is the aesthetic.
Have you seen Jess Cowrey's?
Yes, it's so good.
On Pinterest, you should look at Jess Cowrey's stuff.
Oh,
she has these like insane Pinterest boards with like 50 million images, and they're all like
it's beautiful.
They're beautiful.
It's so good.
That would be a total like her.
And she could do that. Let's try to get her to do that so she can start the trend. Yeah. Now I always joke that I write like blobs with hair. Like that, I have like a general idea of like the space they take up. Now, when I was writing Rebel Belle, I did have a postcard of James Dean, and so David Stark. His name is actually a reference to James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. His character is Jim Stark, and so that's why David's last name is Stark. It's not because I'm a giant Game of Thrones fan, although that is true. Nor is it an Iron Man reference, which I keep getting. And so there's definitely, all the stuff with like David having like very blue eyes and glasses and always like pulling at his hair, that's a James Dean thing, because I had this picture of James Dean with his hand in his hair. But other than that, no. And I also really love seeing the fan cast and sort of, although I did recently watch Grease Live. Did you guys watch Grease Live? I was like kind of obsessed with it. It was really good. And there was this kid in it named Jordan Fisher who was amazing. And I was like, can he be David now? Can I like start a campaign for that to happen? And he was nothing like I'd originally pictured David at all, but like for whatever reason. So I kind of like that. I like to like retroactively cast my books.
So we have time for another question. Who wants to go? Yes.
Have you ever reread your books, like stepped away from the book and after it's published and everything, just reread and like what did you think?
Oh man, it is like a truth universally acknowledged that if you pick up the finished copy of your book, you will turn to the one page where there is a typo. Every time. I do not reread my books. It's too weird for me. I tried to listen to them because I thought maybe if I listened to them on audiobooks. My mom actually refuses to listen to my audiobooks because she says that it sounds like I'm dead. It sounds like somebody like narrating my words like in a documentary, like the Civil War, like Ken Burns style. That's my mom can't handle my audiobooks. So, but it was too weird then. It was hearing somebody read my words back to me was too weird. So no, I can't do it. And I think it's probably, I think I would just want to change things. I would just see everything that was wrong. And it's better if I don't do that.
I mean, I find once I've read it a certain number of times, I don't know if anyone does theater or anything like that, but you know, if you've said your lines enough, you're sort of like, sometimes you're having like an almost out of body experience as you're saying them, and like you're acting, but in your mind you're thinking, tonight for dinner, this is what I'm gonna make, and blah, blah, blah. And I think that's sort of what I get to after I've reread something a certain number of times. I'm almost not seeing it anymore. So I made a point when I did my last read through for editing it before it went off to like make notes of things I needed to remember for the second book, like people and place names and things like that, so that I wouldn't have to like reread the whole thing to find things, like if I'd forgotten what I'd named X city or whatever, because I do just forget that sort of information, names especially. So I haven't reread it since it's in actual physical form.
Once I've put a book in and it's been bound and it's out there in the world, it becomes a kind of separate entity. So I can pick it up and I can reread it and I can get sucked into my own story. And that's usually takes about a year or two before that can really happen. But because I've read it so many times during the editing process, you don't want to read it. But after that year, and once it's bound and out there, I can't change it. It's how it is, and I can get sucked into it. So.
I had to read Ember again recently for research because I had forgotten a bunch of stuff and was like, what did he say to her when that happened, and needed to quote it and stuff. So that was the last time I read it, and it was pretty weird. I think it was just like, did I wrote that? Oh, that's not bad, and then other parts where I'm like, oh God, I wrote that. So I think that when you look back at your work, you hopefully as you're writing, you're growing as a writer. So you look back and you do see your mistakes, and I don't really see that as a bad thing. I see it as a great thing because that means that you've learned something, hopefully. So
I don't read my books at all, at all. I don't get anywhere near them, but I think that maybe 20 years from now, I'd like to sit down with my books and get to know younger April again, and and see what I thought about things, and and how I saw the world. Yeah, so maybe someday.
Awesome. Well, ladies, thank you so much for tonight. Guys, thank you so much for everything.
All right, thank you all for coming. Those of you who are watching on the internet, if you'd like any of these books personalized by any of these lovely ladies, call the number on your screen. There'll be someone to pick up the phone and take your order. And all right, let's just give a really loud Books and Books. Come on. Woohoo! Thank you so much, ladies, and thank you and have a great night.